Simply click on your name under participants, use the chat or QA. I believe that's everything. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome Victoria and walk you through a little bit about her. So Victoria is the founder and CEO of Wellness Works Canada. She has worked in the field of health promotion and workplace health for over 20 years and has a passion for advocating for the profound impact well-being has on performance. She has worked to develop, implement, and evaluate workplace health strategies in numerous public, nonprofit, and private organizations. She has a master's in business administration and a bachelor of physical education, and is a certified personal trainer, nutrition, and weight loss coach. So please take it away, Victoria.
Thank you, Kel. Thanks for that warm welcome. All right. So let's get started. Today we have a really great session in front of us, and I think we have over 1,000 people who are registered and are joining or watching on YouTube or joining with us here today. So it really brings to light how important this topic really is for us today to be addressing. Right? We know that throughout the last year or so, or over the last year, we've been challenged in so many ways, right? We've been challenged in terms of our resilience and our agility. We've been challenged to be able to grow and adapt and change and innovate in so many ways. And obviously, the way that we live, the way that we work, the way that we play, it all has just been so different for this last year. And so, there obviously are a lot of negative impacts that we've seen come out of it. But I think it's also important to know that oftentimes where great innovation comes from and where real growth can come from can be from discomfort. So early on in my career, I was working as a personal trainer, and I coach triathletes and do some of that kind of work. And whenever I would be talking to clients, I would always talk about, if you are in your comfort zone, you are not growing, right? You need to get outside of that comfort zone in order to be able to grow and get stronger, right? Otherwise, we're just stagnant. We might start becoming a little bit apathetic. So, I mean, to compare that to the pandemic may be a little bit extreme, or it maybe not quite on the same par, because some people have absolutely been devastated through it. We know that so many careers, so many industries, so many organizations and businesses have not been able to manage through this, right? So I don't want to make light of that, but I do want to emphasize that there is an opportunity that's coming out of this. And so I think it's important for us to look at that opportunity and think about how we can use this discomfort for growth to support us in our resilience and in our agility to be able to grow forward. I actually heard a great quote from Curtis Strange. He's the CEO of ATB, and he often says, and he used to say this pre-pandemic, and he said that in order for us to be successful, we used to think that we had to have a good IQ to do well in our roles, and then EQ came along, right? And then that's been the big rave for years now, and it's absolutely a critical skill for us to be successful as leaders, and for anybody to be successful in our roles. But now we've kind of almost moved beyond that because of the rate of change, the different types of disruption that we've been facing. And then, of course, through the pandemic, now we need to have a good AQ, which is an agility quotient or an adaptability quotient, because this agility and this adaptability has never been more clear throughout this pandemic. So we're going to talk about how we can foster that to support our mental health and well-being and to support our performance as well. So I have a couple of other negative things to talk about, but we're going to continue to talk obviously about some really practical things that we can take away, again, to support the mental well-being and performance of our employees and our organizations and ourselves moving forward through this. I wanted to share this with you. It is a diagram of some of the collateral damage by Victor Sang. He's a physician, and this is his prediction. So, if you think of the pandemic as a tsunami, there's been several waves, and there's always this aftermath, right? That happens past it, right? The big wave comes, but then there's the damage afterwards that we have to clean up. And so a lot of people right now are in survival mode, and being in a survival mode for over a year tends to often can lead to things like burnout, right? So he points out here that in this fourth wave, we can think about looking at here the psychological trauma and the impacts of that haven't been fully seen. We have a lot of stats in terms of the increase in the need for mental health and mental well-being in people, but not quite to the fact that we still might, or not quite to the same impact that we may see soon in the near future. And of course, the economic injury we're seeing for sure, but it is still hasn't fully unfolded yet, right? And then, of course, I just really want to point out this burnout piece. So, especially for a lot of leaders who have had to be extremely agile and had their resilience tested at every level, it's now really important for us to realize that you can only be in this survival mode of go 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 for so long before it ends up turning into something like a burnout. And so, I mean, yes, we are living in a lot of fear and uncertainty around a lot of things, and there are a lot of things that aren't a given, right? Like, will there be another fourth wave of shutdowns? We don't know. Will our businesses be shut down? What will things look like, right? And so, and will there be other variants that are going to come out, and how is that going to impact us? But I love this quote here around, even though there are some uncertainties, the best way that we can navigate through this is to really be able to go ahead and create the future with the few knowns that we do have, to help give us control and to have control over the things that we can control, and to move forwards with that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So a couple little more negative things before we get into some of the practical tips of how we can support each other. So we do know that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted mental health and mental well-being quite significantly. I think it's only about 40% of the population who are now saying that they have, the major signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression. But over 81% of people have indicated that it has negatively impacted their mental health in general, whether or not that means that there's a mental illness, because we all have mental health, right? Every single one of us has mental health, and it exists on a continuum. So we can have a mental illness that can be debilitating, or we can have a mental illness where we can actually thrive very well, or we may not have a mental illness or a mental health problem at all, and we can really be thriving as well and have great mental well-being. And so it's no secret that having good mental well-being, which can really be defined as the ability for us to deal with life's challenges and life's stressors, and to be able to reach our potential. So if we do not have mental well-being, we're not reaching our potential, we're not going to be productive, we're not going to be performing to the best of our ability, right? And so it is imperative that within our workplaces that we really invest in the mental well-being of our people, because what is an organization? It's a group of people working towards a common shared purpose and vision, and so we need those people to be working at their optimal to be able to achieve your vision mission to sell your products and services. Another thing to note is that we know that about 39% of employees are only comfortable going back into the office. So that means 61% people aren't. So we know that the future is going to look like having hybrid workplaces and trying to support and accommodate. And of course, there's different expectations from different people, different generational groups in terms of what that looks like. And so we need to be mindful of that. And of course, we also know that, small business makes up the majority of business in Canada, right? It makes up over 70% of all private sector. And we know that about 20,000 businesses is predicted through CFIB may be closing permanently. And so this is having a devastating economic impact for sure, right? And so we need to be thinking about so many different things in terms of how we can pivot and innovate, because to support our overall economy, right? I mean, yes, we're thinking about just our organizations or our teams or our businesses, but we really need to think to a little bit beyond that. So one more negative thing, and we'll get into the positive. So that is that Dr. Linda Duxbury does a lot of really great research, and she has recently shared some of this. And the positivity levels, which has a direct impact on our overall well-being, have really declined. So here, only 6% of the population of the survey's respondents were mostly knowledge economy workers, reported being actively positive, but 57% have been actively negative. And it's no surprise when we think about the media and all the news. Like, there's not too much positive in the news, right? And so we really need to be thinking about how we can really support and support this positivity, because this is absolutely impacting overall mental well-being. But the good news is that Deborah Connors often quotes Dr. Michael West. He's out of the University of Lancaster in the UK, and he does a lot of research around positivity and purpose within organizations, and how that can support them, and resiliency, and especially within teams. And he looks at things like collective intelligence as well. And his research is very strong. And I think a lot of people think, oh, it's, this is a nice thing to have, to be thinking about investing in positivity and resilience within our teams, but it has a direct outcome. So in healthcare, the ultimate thing that you want to be preventing is patient mortality, right? You want to have this decline in patient mortality, and obviously you want to have good quality of care and good other health outcomes. But through his studies, he's shown that just increasing the positivity and resilience actually impacts patient mortality rates. So that's pretty strong stuff. It's not this fluffy stuff that we sometimes think of when we're thinking about supporting, mental health and mental well-being, or overall wellness within workplaces. Another thing to note is that is around psychological safety. So if anybody isn't familiar with psychological safety, Canada's the first country in the world to develop a voluntary set of guidelines. It is a standard to support psychological health and safety, and this standard is based on 13 psychosocial factors that can influence and prevent psychological harm, psychological injury, and also promote good, positive mental health and mental well-being. And there's another even step beyond that we can look at. So Amy Edmondson and Dr. Timothy Clark are two other big gurus in this, and they go almost a step beyond, and really look at it in a positive light, of one where we can create environments where people feel safe to take interpersonal risks. They feel safe to learn without any judgment. They feel safe to contribute, to ask silly questions, to suggest improvements in processes and the way things are done, and to suggest, and to even maybe challenge kind of the status quo. And through Amy Edmondson's research, she has a good book called The Fearless Organization, if anybody's looking for some reading. She says, through all of her research, it's really the number one determinant of team effectiveness. And even Google has done a big study to find out what makes certain teams more highly effective than others. And it was through Project Aristotle, and they found that psychological safety, again, was the number one thing there. So we'll talk a little bit how to foster that within the workplace, and we're going to look high level too in terms of how to support your organization and support this mental well-being and performance through disruption. And our main focus here is going to be on culture, because the research is clear that culture is everything. If you've heard of Peter Drucker, who's the founder of modern management, he often says that that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it really is so true. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have a culture where people are bought into it and have this clear sense of visioning towards it, and they don't, and they're not following it, and they're not inspired, and the culture just isn't there, it'll fall flat. But that's not to say that you can't have a strategy for your culture, or that culture isn't embedded into the strategy that you already have for your organization. That is really something that's really key, because again, from very recent research from the OC Tanner Institute, we can see that, and not, if you don't have a thriving culture before the pandemic, and you get disruption or there is a crisis, you're not going to be able to live through it and to be successful through it. So I want to share with you a model on some success factors, and what a model that you can really take and use within your organization and adapt it based on your specific culture. And so this model here is based on a few really key critical success factors, which include a clear vision. This vision piece is really, really, really so important. Um, it has to be relatable for employees. And oftentimes, if your overarching vision within your organization isn't that relatable, having team mantras or mantras within departments that can resonate to allow people to have this sense of purpose and see beyond. Throughout change and disruption, we may not always know the how of where we're going to get to be where we need to be able to manage what we're going through, but knowing the why will help us figure it out together in a positive way. Another really key thing, and one of the number one things that helps organizations thrive through change, is having inclusive leadership, where people don't feel like the change is being done to them and that they're a victim of it, but that they have a voice and that they have an ability to contribute and be part of that solution, which in a way is a good news, right? Because that means less of that burden is weighing down on you as the leader or for the leaders, right? Because you're in it together. And then another one is really just the lived by values. So I'm just going to walk through this here quickly. So there's a few drivers that impact culture. These are a few, but there are a lot. So one of them is leadership philosophy. So of course, the philosophy of leadership is really going to be key. Things like job characteristics of, what it like work design, if people have autonomy, if they have a sense of control, if and that's another big piece of what helps people thrive through disruption and be mentally well and to perform well. If you have a high workload and a high level of a challenge, but you have no control over how you meet that challenge, your performance is going to be down here. But if you have a high level of control and autonomy to be able to figure things out and you feel invested in it and you have a high workload, chances are, or a big challenge, that you will be able to perform at a high level. And so those types of characteristics, and having employees have the opportunity to provide input on their job design, especially now that they're maybe working remotely or doing something differently, or you have a hybrid environment. These things are really, really important and will speak to the culture. Of course, your practices, policies, and procedures. So, do you have policies on, zero tolerance for harassment and bullying? Do you have an inclusive policy around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are your daily practices? Like, how do you deal with challenges? How do you have your meetings? Is it always this issue focused, or do you also celebrate the wins? Um, all of these little things. And then, of course, do people have the resources and the capabilities? And does the organization have the resources and the capabilities to do the work? So these are a few examples. There's a lot of different types of drivers, and different drivers will influence it more in different organizations, like even your hierarchy, how flat you are, all of these different things. But these are different ones to consider to use in your own model, just to really paint a clear picture between, again, your culture and the performance of your individuals and your company. So I wanted to move on to talk a little bit about individual health, safety, and performance. So a lot of times we talk about engagement, employee engagement, and how that can support them to perform. And for sure it does, but I would encourage everybody to take it one step further and to look at inspiration. How can we actually inspire people? All the research is clear through Gallup and other organizations is that people are, yes, they like to be paid well, but compensation isn't the number one driver, right? It is more about being really clearly connected to this purpose, to having this sense of belonging, to be living in a culture where they feel pride in their work and they get rewarded for that work. And so we need to focus beyond just making sure that they're engaged, because we know that over half the working population is often actively disengaged, which means they're actually hurting the organization, not helping it. And so we need to work a little bit more around creating that inspiration. And some ways that we can do that are, by promoting, both the physical and the psychological safety. When there are less errors, when people live in an environment where they're psychologically safe, and they're not always guarding themselves. If you've heard of Brene Brown, she often talks about What gets in our way of courage is often our armor, and that armor is something that we use to protect ourselves. But if we don't feel like we need to protect ourselves because we are open and free and fully included to speak our mind and challenge things, and that helps things. And then even with the example, I know Amy Edmondson in one of her TED talks, she talks about how if, for example, a doctor tells the nurse to give the patient a certain type of medication, and she's like, I don't think this is what he needs, but she doesn't want to speak up to the doctor because she's afraid of challenging him because he's her superior and it's the wrong medication, that can have fatal implications, right? This is why psychological safety is so important, to have people feel safe to speak up. And of course, that helps to support things like operational and organizational effectiveness and better quality of service and all of these other things. And when you have inspired people who feel physically and psychologically safe, that supports them to be agile and to be resilient, because resilient is really this key skill that we need, and agility are these key skills that we need to be able to thrive through the changes that we have been experiencing. And all these lead to that individual performance, so because they are mentally well, and they can reach their potential as well. And so again, all of this ties into the high level. If any of you have heard of the balanced scorecard approach, a lot of organizations will have a couple of different perspectives that they will look at to see, well, how is our organization stacking up, and how is it performing? Instead of only focusing in on your financial health, you look at all the things that drive the financial health, and make sure that those are in place, and then the financial health just comes. So obviously the culture to help support people to perform will help support. When we have psychological safety, it can help support organizational effectiveness and quality of your service or your product. It absolutely enhances your customer experience, because if your employees are fully invested and inspired and wanting to make the best experience for them, they'll be able to do that. If they're disgruntled and disengaged, that's not really going to happen, right? It enhances your reputation as an organization, because people see you as an employer of choice. They see that you live good values. I mean, Starbucks, for example, 87% of the people that go to Starbucks, they go there because they like the way they treat their people. So it really has a huge impact, and all of these things lead to financial health. So having a clear model that connects the dots can be something that's important. But of course, it's important to remember these key success factors. So we're going to dive down now into a few different tips that can help us in building a healthy culture that can help people thrive through the disruption and help support their overall mental well-being as well. So I'm probably talking to the converted a little bit about what a healthy culture fosters. But in case you weren't convinced yet, there's a lot of research here, right? I mean, we know all the reduced cost of lost time, reduced injuries. I'm not going to read all of these things here, but one of the key things that's really important is that collective productivity piece that is so key and important, and how it can enhance so many other things. And then, of course, reduce this burnout, which is going to be the after effect, right, of the tsunami that we faced. And so it's so important that we invest in that. Through Harvard, there's a course called Culture of Health, and they share some research there too that just emphasizes again how important it is. So here, organizations that have a culture of health have up to 5 times higher revenue growth, 6 times the employment growth, 10 times stock price growth, and 700 times the net revenue growth. So this again is not soft stuff. It is something that's really imperative for us to focus in on in order to support mental well-being and performance. So again, as we've said, one of the key things that's going to help us to be able to thrive through disruption is this culture built on this relatable vision and the shared purpose. And there's a great quote out of Deborah Connor's book that says, "Visioning is iterative, and so it must speak to the heart. We need to pass it by a lot of people, because where we start our vision may not be where our vision ends up. So to capture people, they need to see themselves in it." And so that doesn't mean, if you're a large organization, you need to go about changing your whole vision, but it is ideal to have at least a strong mantra that can speak to that speaks to people that are there. And the only way to know what people really want and what they see and what's relatable to them is to ask them, through a survey, through conversations, right? And just to make sure that that is there so that they feel that and that is what really helps people to feel inspired. So then, of course, the other three factors that I was talking about was psychological safety is so important. So we'll talk more about this. Having support for people and connection. Connection is more important now than ever, right? Because of the pandemic and being disconnected the way we are. And of course, having this inclusive leadership where everybody is a part of has a part in decisions. They feel free to speak up and they feel a part of the change, not like it's being done to them. Because again, people with little control over their work and having a lot of that uncertainty and that fear and a high workload, their performance is going to fall off. But if we give them that control, and their performance will be stellar. Okay, so let's talk about some tips and get practical about some key things that we can support organizations with. So, one of the key things is, so in order to have this iterative vision that speaks to people, where people see themselves in it, to identify what the current fears and needs are that some people may be afraid to bring up right up the bat if you don't have a culture that is perfectly psychologically safe to begin with, is to do a survey or to do an audit to find and doing an audit says, well, what are we already doing? Like, let's take stock at all of the supports and all of the things that we have available to our employees. And let's make sure that they are fully aware of those, because I have seen in so many organizations, oftentimes somebody will complete an audit and they aren't themselves aware of their employee family assistance program, and yet they're like the GM for that branch or for that area, and they're not aware of it themselves. And so making sure that people are aware of some of the stuff that you already have is to support their mental well-being is something that's really key. And then asking as well in your survey, what does the ideal workplace look like to you? And that helps with your visioning and coming up with maybe a mantra to follow through with. Our mantra is that we need to be well to do well, but because that we're in the business of wellness, and so that makes sense, right? But it's important to find something that works for you. Another key thing, of course, is explicit communication and transparency. So transparency doesn't mean everything. It just means being if you don't know exactly what's going to happen about something, be honest about it, right? And tell people where they're at and involve them in decisions into is support this inclusive leadership, but also look at making sure that the communication is a lot more explicit, because there is so much uncertainty, and when people are feeling anxiety, it's harder for people to feel like they are feeling free to be a part of change. And they may not be hearing things as well, right? Because our brains work differently when we're anxious, right? Our prefrontal cortex, it kind of shuts off and our hindbrain takes over. And so we just need to be a little bit more clear to keep everybody on board as well. So if you do a survey, make sure you share the results with people right away, and you connect and find out what that shared purpose right away is, so that you can jump on that to keep people inspired, because you may not know the how always or what's going to happen, but if you have the why, you'll figure out the how together. Okay, so then another key important factor here is to make sure that there is shared responsibility and that there is integration. So to support some people in large organization, you might want to create a strategy to support health and performance in your organization. In a smaller organization, you may just embed simple things into your existing operational plans, and you may do that in a large organization as well. You just may have something written up about it that's formal, so that you can make sure you track your success. So if you already have an approach where you plan and then you do it, and then you check it, and then you you act on it and assess and go through that PDCA approach, then that can be really helpful in just embedding this into whatever you're already doing. But otherwise, it's just integrating things into your overall business functions and your overall overarching strategy. So if you're in your HR business plan, you have an outcome about people. Just make sure that you tie in their well-being and their ability to perform together. I've seen organizations, and I recommend it, to include competencies around well-being, because we know that helps them reach their potential, into performance development processes, or for leadership competencies that people are striving towards. Include that in there, and that can be really helpful. Including it in your occupational health and safety mechanism. So if you have joint work safety meetings, make sure well-being is a standing agenda item. You don't necessarily always need an extra committee. Just embed it in there. Your policy, same thing. You may not need a new policy. You may just need to expand it and have some more clear regs. You may need a code of conduct. You may also want to look at your hazard risk assessments to make sure you're assessing psychological health, right? And if you're doing attestations for people coming into the office and saying, oh, are you fit? Did were you sick in the last 24 hours? Did you go anywhere? Did you see anybody? How are you feeling? Do you have a sore throat, runny nose, all these things? Actually ask, how are you doing today in that attestation? And it's a great check-in just to see how people are doing and to show that you care about their mental well-being as well, and not just if they're contagious. And that can be really helpful. So the key thing with all of this is to make sure that, that we lead behind or with our people, and we do things with them, not for them, to keep them inspired to be able to adapt to the change, because that is one of the number one successful things that organizations do that successfully thrive through any big change, is that they really involve employees throughout the process as they're going. So here's some other ideas for supports that we can offer for people. So one thing that we can do is looking at integrating things like putting the OH back into OH&S. So having a mental health first aid kit to show employees that their mental health and their mental well-being is just as important as their physical health. So integrating it into OH&S. So we actually have mental health first aid kits, and they're jam-packed. You can throw in your EAP cards, your Employee Assistance Program phone numbers, but they're also jam-packed with all kinds of other free community resources, breathing exercises, resilience tips, inspirational cards, like essential oils, fidget toys, and it makes it a little bit fun and less scary to talk about, right? And so those can be just a great visual show of how you can support people. Offering training is really key as well. So resilience and agility is a skill, and we're not all born with it, but it is absolutely something that can be learned. So doing things like having mental health first aid or resilience training available can be really great to create that common language and to create that support and that peer support, and an employee resource group available to help to support each other. So those things can be really helpful as well. And again, if you have an employee family assistance provider, remember, and when you promote it, I actually had the good fortune of speaking with the founder of Morneau Chappelle last week, and Warren Chappelle, one of them, and he said that EFAPs are really, they have two streams. One of them is the prevention and promotion and everyday challenges. They're there for everyday challenges. You don't need to have an immediate big crisis or a diagnosable mental health disorder to call that number, and making that clear with your employees, and or even sharing those reports. A lot of times there's a fear that they're going to be identified for calling the number, and to sharing a report and saying, hey, this is all we get, this is anonymous, and like, please use it, it is a resource here for you, can be something that can be really helpful for people as well. And then there's all kinds of other different resources, of course, is 211 is that phone number for mental health supports that's available through most of Canada. Wellness Together Canada, togetherall.com is a website where people can go on to share with other people who are dealing with similar mental health problems and challenges, and they're moderated by practitioners, so that supports connection as well. Doing things like walking meetings on your phone, right? I know we're virtual, but you can still have a walking meeting on your phone with your team instead of just sitting at your desk, to reduce that Zoom fatigue. and make sure that people's remote environment is healthy for them as well, so that they have the right resources. We have a work from home survival guide that's free to be on our website that you can download. We have ergonomic office guides for people who are working at home or remotely. All of these things can be really helpful. A big research was just done through the Global Wellness Institute as well around the impact of having greenery in your space, especially when you're working from home. And so sending a plant, right? Making sure that people have proper lights and ergonomics and all these things can be really important to help people to thrive through this change that we've been going through of working from home. And there's much more, there's many more tips in those guides and to help support people there as well. And then meetings, oh my goodness. So, often I do polls around meetings, and so many people have like 3 to 7 meetings a day, and it hijacks your time. And so being smart with your meetings is really, really important to make sure that they're not time being wasted. And so starting them off with a bang. So usually we come up, oh, we've got an issue, let's just deal with it and get down to business. But, take that 2 minutes to start with a success, start with a win, share a minute of mindfulness, whatever it is, start it off on a high note. And that really it changes the positivity of the team environment to help to support it to be able to be more successful. Another idea is to have this after action reflection, this AAR, where you end it, and it helps. It's basically a debrief for your meetings. It can increase the efficiency of your or effectiveness, sorry, of your meeting by up to 50%. So basically, you ask, what went right, what went wrong, and what can we do differently next time? And just to make sure that your meetings are as efficient as possible moving forwards. Another one is that we often miss time in our after meetings because we're sitting if you're working remotely. So making sure that there's time for reflection or that hallway walk that we're missing out on, like have 50-minute meetings and no, like do not make them a full hour. Give people time to breathe and reflect because that is where the real stuff happens, right? Our brain only actually comes up with great solutions after the fact, oftentimes, and so that's important. Another thing is maybe to have after focus Fridays. So we have a no meeting Fridays, and that's great for time to just focus in on projects, and it's been really, really successful as well. All right, a couple more tips here, and we're going to focus on you and open it up for questions and answers as well. So connection is again so important. It's been more important than ever now. Connection is actually one of the leading causes of premature death, more so than physical inactivity. And with my background, it was physical activity for a while before moving into more broader health promotion and workplace health and business. And yeah, so I found that surprising. But this connection is in hybrid workplaces is so important for team effectiveness, right? So we need to make sure that we involve employees in all decisions and just don't do things for them, right? So we need two-way communication versus one-way. It's got to be two-way. We got to recognize contributions and sacrifices every day, whatever it is. You can have thank you Thursdays, whatever it is to help make sure that you're recognizing contributions, and engage and purposefully create relationships and connection through whatever instant messaging platform you have. And have a gratitude channel, have people put up their emoji in the first thing in the morning of how they're feeling, just to set the tone for the day and to set that connection, right? Or having 10-minute meet calls where there's no work, right? It doesn't have to be a big time sucker, but just a 10-minute connection of like, let's just connect as a human being can be really, really helpful as well as some of these other things here too. All right. So actually, I'm going to talk first around flexibility and control. So flexibility and control, as I mentioned, if people are now working in hybrid and working a little bit remotely, giving people control over their job design, giving flexibility over their work hours, knowing that they have other demands is something that is going to give them that higher sense of control to support them. And it's a huge game changer. And so lastly, I'm going to move into modeling self-care and vulnerability for you as a leader and how you can support yourself because you need to be well to do well. And so just take a minute and take stock. So if you're starting to lead day by day, if you're starting to lose vision, have a poor sleeping patterns, being more frustrated with others, unable to communicate as well as you normally can, not exercising as much, don't have as much enthusiasm, becoming a little bit numb. then it's time to intentionally invest in your own well-being. And remember that self-care is not selfish, right? So reach out to a mentor. A great opportunity to reach out to a mentor actually is to join our CEO Ambassador Network. So we have a network of CEOs who have signed the Workplace Health and Performance Charter, and it is a great way as well. I'm going to share a little more about that in a minute. Practice gratefulness to increase that positivity, which we know is a direct outcome on our performance. So, think about 2 to 3 things that you're grateful for every night and write it down in a journal. It takes like a minute, and it really helps to change your mindset. Try to get active, do things like pick a couple of things that would work for you. Definitely not all. Like pick 2 things. Think about practicing mindfulness. There's some good apps out there. One called Calm, one called Headspace. There's a few good ones out there. So check those out. Make sure to intentionally connect with others on a personal level as much as possible. And make sure to set healthy boundaries and prioritization and to really focus, because we cannot do it all perfectly. We need to have those healthy boundaries and pick, our top 5 things that we're going to be focusing in our business, right? We can't have a list of 20 things where we're not going to be successful. Do 5 things well and wait for those others. Or think about what what the military does, what you're going to do, what you're going to delay, what you're going to delegate, and what you're going to don't do, right? And pass off to somebody else. So the key takeaways for this is to make sure that if you want your people to thrive and have positive mental well-being and to be able to perform through this disruption so that your organization can do the same, know what your employees want and need. So identifying those current needs and supports is so important so that you can have that collective relatable vision or mantra that's going to work with you and to help inspire people. Make sure that there is integration. You don't need to create a whole new program, but just integrate into what you're already doing into your daily business practices and facilitate this shared responsibility and accountability throughout it all, so which takes some of the weight off of you, right? And then again, these daily practices, things like healthy meetings, integrating psychological safety, making sure there's support and connection are so important. And remember to prioritize you as a strong model as well, a role model as well, because again, you need to be well to do well. So I know, we are here to help. We offer, as Kale mentioned at the beginning, individual memberships, which give you all the tools, resources, and things that you need, and webinars and connection that you need to build healthy, high performing work cultures. They're actually 20% off. So it works out to like $200 a year. It's really, really reasonable. We have accreditation for workplace health practitioners. We, as an employer, we can do your audit and assessment to help, and really cost effectively as well, to determine what your employees need by a third party, so that lack of confidentiality isn't a concern. Workplace training and our mental health first aid kits. But I just wanted to end, and we'll open up with questions here, is that we also do a lot of advocacy work, and one of the big advocacy things that we've been focused in on right now is our National Workplace Health and Performance Charter. So this charter is a really amazing opportunity for leaders, whether you're a workplace health practitioner or you're a CEO, to sign to show your commitment to supporting employee well-being as a driver of organizational performance and a healthy population and a high-performing economy. Because as we can see, all of the things that help organizations thrive through disruption does have to do with well-being. And so these things are so important. So there's a couple ways to get involved. You basically just sign to show your commitment so we can make that movement, or you can become a part of the CEO Ambassador Network, and then we help share and facilitate your best practices and share those with others so that other people have great tools, techniques, and practices that they can use. And obviously you get a lot of connection through that as well, and opportunity to kind of meet some mentors. So I'll open it up to questions here. We have a few minutes. So I see lots of activity going on in the chat function. So Kale, did you want to bring?
If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat or use the Q&A function. You can also unmute and ask out loud. I did notice that Brian just had a question, and he's asking, what's the role of lower level managers and supervisors in supporting employee mental health?
Yeah, it's huge. It's really, really huge. I think oftentimes where things go wrong in organizations is that there's this high level of approach, and yes, you need high level leadership and executives on board to give that permission, but it's at the management level, the direct relationship between the employees and their direct level manager that makes the biggest difference. And so the role there is to, if there are corporate resources that you can use to help to support them, obviously using those, but also, integrating in the meetings that you have, implementing some of these practices, looking at when you do performance development and growth, looking at how you can embed the support for the mental well-being within those, having those check-ins. So I think that is a key component of it for sure. I think everybody, and in fact anybody, can be an ambassador for supporting a workplace health. And even if you were the employee wanting to coach up to your manager, then that's all a role as well.
Yes, and just a reminder that this is being recorded and it is going to be posted on our YouTube site. So if you just check out Wellness Works Canada, you can watch it back and get all the information there again.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I see some questions if it'll be recorded. It is recorded, so it will be online.
And then another question here: how do you balance giving leaders a place to give their thoughts, feedback that might be negative without the worry of that becoming toxic to others who may not have initially shared those negative thoughts?
Yeah. So I think not having anonymity there is really important. So doing a survey to find out what people are, so that they have the opportunity to provide that anonymously, right? And often having it done by a third party, it can help to facilitate that, and to make sure that that feedback is taken, and only a few people will see that feedback, but they won't know who it came from. They'll just know it's an issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. And then another one in the chat: is there a template with the specific questions to be asked for when auditing employees to determine support needed?
Yeah, so we do have an audit online that we use. Right now, it's only available to members, but we do have some that are available that are free as well. So yeah, so there's a few different types of questions that we can ask to look at. So yeah, so our template is online. It is for members only right now. So I would encourage you to become a member, because you get access to the surveys, the policy templates, a lot of employee facing resources as well, all of our recorded webinars as well, and a lot of them are employee facing as well. So yeah, so that would be recommended. But some of the key questions, oftentimes, aligning it with the psychological health and safety standard can be a good idea to look at that. And then we do have some checklists as well to that can be used as well. And so we will follow up afterwards with some links to resources.
We have a lot of questions rolling in here. It's awesome. Next question: how do you promote the EAP more effectively? Having worked for insurance carriers, I noticed that the usage of EAP amongst small business or even mid and large corporations is quite low.
Yeah, yeah. So it's quite interesting, right? So I know some people have seen the drug usage of mental health types of supports really go quite high, and their EFAP usage has stayed the same. And so it is, I mean, if you have a mental health first aid kit, throwing it in there, making sure that you talk about it. Oftentimes, I find for some people, there's that fear again of confidentiality. So sharing the reports with people, and sharing it in a light of, this is acceptable. We hope and expect everybody to use it, because it is a resource there for you. It's not just for crises, it's there for everyday challenges as well. And so including it, even if you have any town halls, team meetings, newsletters, intranet, and just having it there as a resource, and just promoting it there, and having that phone number, the more the better, and multifaceted, right? Multifaceted approaches.
Awesome. So we had a few follow-up questions. They're wanting to know, is the membership open to only Canadians? And then what are the costs associated with the membership, and also the costs of the audit that you mentioned before?
Yeah, so anybody can become a member. We have members in New Zealand and the States and for sure different countries. So it can be outside of Canada. The cost for the memberships right now for the individual memberships are $229 annually. And so that gives you access to tons and tons of different resources, our community of practice, and the resources are recorded webinars and a whole bunch of different things. For the employer memberships, it ranges between 400 and about 1,800, depending on the level of support you want. But we do the audit, the employee survey. We provide segmented results. We do segmented on demographics and different things like that. And up to 2 additional questions can be modified to meet your specific needs as well. And then, of course, with that comes in a report that will give you some key recommendations and findings that is shareable, that is safe to and shareable to share with your employees, and also a 90-minute strategy session or a workshop of choice for your employees. So maybe something on resilience training. So it's really quite cost effective for everything that you get it in there.
Yeah, Nicole has sent a link in the chat if you guys want to go check our site out and review all that information for yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then another question was on if this slide deck was going to be made available anywhere for people to access.
Yeah, so the presentation is recorded, so you will have access to that to be able to access it. And so if you private message afterwards, we can also send you a copy if you'd like. Yeah. Good stuff. So thank you for the comments here that are kind of rolling in. I think we've reached our time. Yeah, and do you provide additional resources for degree students in workplace wellness programs? So yeah, so that's a great question too. So we actually have an accreditation program that complements other degree programs in those areas. And we have a student rate as well, which is only $75. So if you're also a student and looking for additional resources, that's a great option as well. Yeah. All right. All right.
Okay.
Do you want to do the closing? Thanks,
Yeah.
Kel.
Okay, everyone. I think that's going to be it for today. We just want to thank you for attending today's webinar. We will be following up with a few of the resources mentioned. A friendly reminder, if you haven't already, please sign the Workplace Health and Performance Charter by visiting our website, /charter. A few updates. Our next webinar is on June 22nd on setting boundaries, a radical act of self-care for leaders. And then we have another one on reducing financial stress on July 19th. Also, if you or anyone you know is a first responder, we are offering complimentary one-day training sessions on trauma and resilience throughout July and August. They're an amazing opportunity that you won't want to miss out on. So make sure you watch out for the link coming, or visit our website to learn more. So yeah, that'll be everything. Thank you again and have a great rest.